Hey, good morning, good evening, good night. What's crack-a-lackin'? Okay, so this morning, first of all, this morning, this evening, this night, however you would say it, we don't have much news happening today. I don't expect a lot to happen, except for the fact that this news is big. So I know that contradicts things. So yes, I'm expecting something to happen, but not because of like other stuff. It's mainly because of what's going on right now. So Powell testifies, and Trump speaking could shake everything. Evening. Hey, Ask Infinity. How's it going, my brother? All the way from Malawi. That's awesome. It's so nice to have you here. Great to see you. How has your adjustment been to let's say market trading and business over there? Sup, Fahad? Fahad, did you get some names? Did you get a few names at least? No excuses. Don't lie, but no excuses. Good morning, afternoon, night. Yes. It's evening for you, Fahad, and evening for Ask Infinity. He's in Malawi. So let's see what we have going on. So expect the markets to be crazy today. Okay, whenever Trump decides to speak, like if you're in a trade, get the hell out of there. Get out of your trade, or don't get in the trade, because it can go whatever way. Hardly got two names. But you got two names. What do you mean by hardly got two names? You either got two names or you didn't get two names. Explain. Explain yourself, young man. The market is manipulative these days. You're right. And the reason for that, I believe, is because of everything that Donald Trump is doing. For sure. Those are my thoughts. Oh, sorry about that. Let me move it over. I'm afraid to compliment anyone, so did compliment two and also got their names. Okay, so that's good. So the whole point of this exercise is for you to start warming up to networking to people, right? You're starting off by networking with people, and then afterwards you can use it to, speaking to girls, getting a date, whatever you want to do with it. But the most important skill here is you learning how to network and talking to people. which builds confidence. So you're overthinking the complimenting part. The whole idea is to break the ice, is to start a conversation. What if instead of looking for a compliment, you look for something to talk about? Nice watch, nice shoes. You're in Bangladesh, so for sure people wear sandals everywhere, right? Nice sandals. Where your toes look like they're in good condition. Where do you get a pedicure? I don't know. Just make a conversation. They're in a hurry. Hey, you look like a busy guy. You look like a busy guy. You must be important. I don't know. Use the example of, if let's say you're at a mall or like a public place and people are eating and you see their food. Hey, that looks good. Where did you get that? Where can I get that? Hey, do you eat here often? Because usually when I come here, I usually get this chicken and rice. I've never seen that food here before. What did you order? I'll try that next time. What's your opinion? Did you like it? Would you recommend that? Have you tried the chicken and rice? No, man, they wear Jordan sandals. Wow. They wear Jordan sandals and wigs. We aren't that much backdated in rural areas, but where I live, they use Apple Vision Pro. Damn, you guys are living in the future. That's awesome. My neighbor, the building across from me, the neighbor, the teenager uses the Vision Pros. So I see him like with those on, facing the window every night like this. Looks like Trump dancing. So try something like that. It could be anything. They're walking by you and they have a milkshake or a smoothie or some juice. Even if you know what it is. Hey, what is that? Hey, is that mango? Is that mango? Where did you get that? That looks good. I didn't know they sold mango around here. Hey, is that a coffee? I need a coffee. Where did you get that coffee? Is their coffee good? Yeah? I've never had their coffee. That's starting a conversation. Anything. Doesn't have to be a compliment. A compliment is one way to start it. Someone's walking in a hurry. Hey, you look like you're from around here. I'm looking for a place to eat. Is there anywhere you'd recommend? Hey, you look like you're in a hurry. You probably work around here. For sure you know a place where I could get some good coffee. Where can I get some coffee? Yeah, down the street. All right, thank you very much. Take care. What was your name? All right, take care. Take care, Josh. That's simple. I wonder if they're going to fine or firepower? That's what I'd like to know. I could so see that happening. Trump with the stroke of his mighty pen. Pause. No diddy. What do you mean, am I in? Am I in a trade? No, not yet. Not yet. Yesterday, yes. Today, no. Not yet. Not yet. We will see. Let's go to Raj's favorite, to the blackbbc.com. India sees huge spike in hate speech in 2024. Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. It sucks for the Indian community. What's going on? The massive migration with people from India is what ruined it for the people from India. It helped them in some ways, and then it harmed them in other ways. Richard III, the accidental photo of a long-lost king. But they never advertise the Black Kings. What's it? Nation News. Disclose.tv. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Check. Relax. Yes, I saw your message that Elon wants to buy OpenAI. They won't sell it. They won't sell it. With how things are going, this is just my guess. Most likely they won't sell it, but maybe they'll do some type of partnership or like business deal together. Hold on, Lulo wants to get out. Elon. Mr. Elon Musk. What do you think is going to happen with ChatGPT? Do you think they'll sell it to him? If Elon gets it, we're all cooked. So, some years ago, someone asked me, if you could get into a stock right now, if you could pick any stock, which one would you get? And I said, at this point, Elon Musk had just bought Twitter, and Twitter stock price was going down like a lot because he bought it and he fired a bunch of people. It lost a lot of money. And I said, I would buy all the stocks related to Elon Musk, whether you like the guy or not. This was 3-4 years ago. I said I would get SpaceX if possible, Tesla, but I would load up on X, on Twitter stocks if it's possible. And he asked, why? Why would you do that? And I said, because Elon Musk's original business idea, which is before Tesla, was of building a platform where like you could do like everything, have payments, have chats, and like have everything like all connected in one. So he does a lot of business in China, right? For him to sell Tesla cars in China, he has to be good with the president, dictator, whatever you want to call him, from China, Xi Jinping. So I said he has to be good with them, and that means that he does business there, which means he knows how they function over there. And over there, they have what's called WeChat, and everyone does everything from like one app. So you chat with people in one app, you buy all your stuff with one app, you verify yourself with one app. Like, you don't carry any money. Everything is from like one payment system. Your credit score is all measured there. You cross the street, they know where you are, all that stuff. Everything is integrated. So that's already there. They've been using that there for like a long time already. So Twitter, or X, basically has a part of that system kind of already built for him. So he doesn't care if it loses money at the beginning, because for sure what he's looking to build is bigger. And him having X and having Tesla cars is one way of connecting that system with cars, and the cars go everywhere, and the cars talk to each other everywhere. On top of that, he has SpaceX, and he has the satellites, whatever it's called. What's it called? Starlink. He has Starlink. So he has Starlink, which is an internet service. At that time, it was coming up. So you have him having a worldwide internet provider. He has electric cars that are basically being built to service and drive themselves. And a communication platform. Having a payment platform is easy because it's kind of already built in there. And that's what he had before, because he is like the founder of PayPal. So making a payment thing is really not hard for him. So that's why I would choose to invest in things like Twitter, SpaceX, and whatever else. Anything to do with Elon. So yeah, he feeds data to us. Imagine if you added ChatGPT into all of that. The amount of conversations that could happen with oh, not us, US. Yeah, sure. But it would be to everybody. Imagine the amount of conversations he could have going on or interpreting on Twitter. At the same time, he could use that like a superior spy device. Because all of those Tesla cars, all of them, they are constantly recording everything, inside and outside. So everything you say in a Tesla car, everything you do is recorded. And ChatGPT does have very good like voice understanding. Like if you speak to it, it understands and it responds back. So imagine if you programmed it. This is just me speaking my mind. Imagine if you programmed ChatGPT to listen in on these conversations, and if you hear certain key phrases or conversations related to this or that, to report it. So now you have a super AI device that's spying on people, and if it's connected to Twitter or X, it'll probably like start to compile some kind of database of people's voices and create like an internal profile, which could be for sure super valuable to the American government and the military, which could then create some type of contract or business deal of like spying on people. I'm just making stuff up, but hey, it's not impossible. It's not impossible, and it's not like they already do that. It's not like they don't already do that, because they do. Raj, where are you, Raj? Beanie Man, sorry. $28.8206. Nice. Why are aliens dancing? 'Cause disclosure. You just reminded me. Thank you for reminding me. I had another one. I made another one, actually. I have a new addition to the family. Hold on. You just reminded me. Thank you. Don't reveal our secret strategy. I'm not, don't worry. I won't reveal it. Where'd it go? Ah, there it is. Okay. We have a new challenger coming. New challenger. Hang tight, hang tight. We have Infinity just reminded me. Is that your cell level? Yes. Yes, it is. The red lines, yes. Cell level. Red lines, cell level, yes. One sec. My airdrop isn't working. Why? I don't know. Good question. You spend like $4 grand on a computer, you'd expect it to work. All right, forget it. Sorry, I have a new dancer for you. Is that your cell? Where is BBC? I mean BBC News saying. Yeah. BBC? I'll show you. Trump to host Jordan's King. Speaking of Jordan, after threatening to withhold aid if Gaza plan rejected. As much as I'm a fan of Trump, this last week, he's been wild. He's a little off the rails. He's been hit with mad cow disease. Mad cow Trump. Okay, let me reset my phone. I have a new dancer for you. How much you appreciated it. What a blackout. What about the blackout? Oh, the blackout. The blackout we'll have to wait and see. That's actually a topic that's not new. Like what I was talking before about like Project Bluebeam and stuff, and pandemics and all that. The topic of a blackout has been in the conversation for a long time also, because the power grid for Canada, US, around the world is not strong enough to withhold like a big attack. So how they've been saying that it's going to be hit is the sun has massive solar flares every so often. And when it has a solar flare, it takes like 15 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes for it to arrive to Earth, these solar flares. And if one day there's a big enough solar flare, it could be big enough to affect our power systems so much to the point where we can't fix it. It'll just be screwed up. And we'll be without power for a long time, for months. For months, if not maybe a few years. $16.88. What do you mean 1688? What are you talking about? Mass extinction on Google. Yeah, of course you're gonna find mass extinction. Mass extinction. But is this what you're talking about? The Big Five. Is this what you're talking about? Path Towards Millionaire. What is 1688? Oh, I know what you're asking. I grew it to 17 something. And then I hit and then I had a loss of like $3. At a loss of like $3, and then it wouldn't let me trade anymore. So like it didn't have enough funds to put a trade in gold. So I'm gonna have to. I'm just gonna start with $100, 50 or 100. I had a win, and then a win, and then a loss. Which sucks because it hit a loss. It hit a loss. And then the next trade that I was going to input would have made up for the loss and gone in profits. But it didn't let me input the trade because it wasn't sufficient funds. So I'm just gonna have to redo it. What is yours at? You said you started with 100. What are you at right now? Okay, so it's my iPhone. Interesting. Okay, we got it. We have a new dancer coming. Who's ready for the new dancer? Danse. dancer, dancer. Yeah. Can't see that, sorry. It's top secret. It's top secret. What is that? Can't tell you. Can't tell you. Can't tell you my secrets. Yeah. Just like that. Got a new dancer. See, Raj, you've been missing out. Wait, the next payout and in challenge, it's effed up. We've blown it. You guys, okay, that you guys blew it because you're doing it without me. That's why. What? You don't like my dancers? That's so cool. No way. What do you mean your dance is the best? What do you mean by our dance is the best? I think I know what you mean by that. But just clarify. Is it a dance you recognize? Have you been caught doing this dance? Ting ting a ting ting. Ting a ting ting dance. Sending personally, I know it sound South Eastern. Here. Drop, I'll tell you what. I will drop the original clip that I stole that from with the song. I'll drop it in the chat. If you guys, I missed my entry. It's done from here. There's no sell for me. So, at least not now. I'll drop the original in the chat. If you guys drop a screenshot of this right now, drop a screenshot of this dancer in the chat, and I'll drop the original video. Because I thought it was really catchy. And I liked the original. I don't know what the song is in the original, but I liked it. I thought the whole video was like a vibe. Don't worry. Drop a screenshot in the chat and I'll drop it and you'll hear everything. All right, I'll drop it for you guys. Okay, sent in private chat. Yeah, I like those. Thank you, Raj, for sending those. I like that. That's gonna be my new sticker. Fahad, drop a screenshot of the dancer. Drop a screenshot. Jordan, if you're here, drop a screenshot. And I'll drop the original video. Oh no, we were off by 40 pips. 40 pips. So news just happened. News is happening. Where is CNN? Bloomberg. Still go. Okay. As promised. Okay, I promised you. Okay. That's the original. Damn, look at that drop. Bloomberg, that's what I'm looking for. No, it's not AI. It's legit. So I don't know. So when I see it dancing, I'm thinking of that music. Because even though I don't understand what they're saying in that music, the type of music that it is reminds me a lot of like Colombian music, but like older Colombian music from like my grandparents' time. He's similar to Jadu. I don't what's Jadu. Let's see. I'm gonna get past this paywall. What is Jadu? Nope. I know that that's not what you're talking about. I know you're not talking about a junior accessory dwelling unit. Yeah, the music does sound Indian. for sure it's Indian, the music. But the type of like how it sounds, like the type of instruments and like the vibe reminds me of like older Colombian music from my grandparents' time, like from the mountains. I don't think this is what you meant either. Magic? Is that what you're talking about? Magic? No. Check group. Okay, so that's Jadu. Poor guy or girl. Can't call them a creature. That's not fair. Jadu. Okay. Can't call them a creature. Come on. It's not their fault they were born that way. Jadu. Cool. Jadu. Is this like your Grogu? Is this India's Grogu? That's so cool. That's so cool. Okay, yeah. Why is he blue? He's a Jadu dancer. Either he's a Jadu dancer, or he likes Avatar, or don't forget like Krishna and Vishnu are blue also. Like I know Krishna is blue. And jinns are blue. Genies are blue. Or genies are representation of jinns. So they say aliens from the galaxy Andromeda are blue. So it could be a spiritual dance. No, he's a creature from the movie Krish, which every Indian and Bangladeshi kid watched in childhood and bought a Krish mask. That's so cool. This is Grogu, by the way. So this is what I was saying. Indian Grogu. Grogu? Jadu. I wonder, does this exist? Let's vote before I forget. Before I forget. How do you know? Are you reading Ramayan Maya book? No, no, but I've read some of the Bhagavad Gita, and I have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. And I've gone to Krishna temples. They know me. When I go to a Krishna temple, they know me. Because one of their like devotees that would come and speak from California, I met him downtown his first day here, his first day in Toronto, and they always remember me at the Krishna temple when I go. And that was like 15 years ago. So whenever I go to the Indian temple, I'll dance. I'll go and I'll dance their Krishna dance. I'll have prasadam with them, and I'll eat on the floor. I'll eat on the floor their vegetarian food. Smurf cat meme. I'm scared to look that up. I'm a professional troll, so I know when to be afraid of what to look up. Smurf cat meme. That is a recipe. That is a recipe for cancellation. I'll look it up on my phone first. I know a good troll when I see one. Smurf. So like, I guess safe, I guess. You're lucky. In a way it's borderline, but yeah, right. Try to give me a virus? Get out of here. I've never seen that. Oh, it's making me pay, but you could see it the whole time. Flabbergast. He was a meme so annoying. I have never heard of this. Ever. Like, for sure it was in your region, like in your region of the world. But here, this does not exist. I've never seen this. I'm not surprised, because if you look at a lot of like the wordings and stuff here, is you see a lot of like, I guess, Urdu and stuff. It looks interesting. So, I guess, do you approve of my new dancer? That one's not permanent. That one's just for fun. Continue reading with one option below. Enter your email. Oh my god. My bad. Try to cheat the system. As I said, the dance is the best. I like it. I thought it was cool. I liked the dance. Okay, let's fix this. We are going to watch what's going on. I want to watch it live. I guess maybe it's too late.
Prices rose 2.6% over the 12 months ending in December.
Oh, here we go.
Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.8%. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. Since last September, the FOMC lowered the policy rate by a full percentage point from its peak, after having maintained the target range for the federal funds rate
Just gonna get some water.
to 5.5% for 14 months.
Listen to Mr. Powell.
That recalibration of our policy stance was appropriate.
If he says something good or bad,
inflation and the cooling in the labor
you'll
market.
see gold jump
Meanwhile,
or drop.
We've continued to reduce our securities holdings. With our policy stance now significantly less restrictive than it had been, and the economy remaining strong, we do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance. We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too slowly or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering the extent and timing of additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the FOMC will assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. As the economy evolves, we will adjust our policy stance in a manner that best promotes our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains strong and inflation does not continue to move sustainably toward 2%, we can maintain policy restraint for longer. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we can ease policy accordingly. We are attentive to the risks on both sides of our dual mandate, and policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face. This year, we are conducting the second periodic review of our monetary policy strategy, tools, and communications, the framework used to pursue our congressionally mandated assigned goals of maximum employment and stable prices. The focus of this review is on the FOMC's Statement on Longer-Run Goals and Monetary Policy Strategy, which articulates the committee's approach to monetary policy, and on the committee's policy communication tools. The committee's 2% longer-run inflation goal will be retained and will not be a focus of the review. Our review will include outreach and public events involving a wide range of parties, including Fed Listens events around the country and a research conference in May. We will take on board lessons of the past 5 years and adapt our approach where appropriate to best serve the American people to whom we are accountable. We intend to wrap up the review by late summer. Let me conclude by emphasizing that at the Fed, we'll do everything we can to achieve our dual mandate goals that Congress has set for monetary policy. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation sustainably to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. Certainly your words and your actions have a global impact. You have the opportunity and responsibility of leading this country in the right direction economically, and I thank you for your commitment to having a conversation with all of us about how you do that well. You and I had a conversation yesterday. Some of it was frustrating, some of it was illuminating, but in the end, my goal is to make sure that the American people, and specifically those working paycheck to paycheck, have more opportunities to succeed, not fewer. You have said that the Fed is not against innovation, and banks are perfectly able to serve crypto customers as long as they understand and can manage the risks. Yet you have admitted that the threshold has been a little higher for banks engaging in crypto activities. Last week, I held a hearing on debanking and once again heard that federal banking agencies, in particular the Fed, use reputational risk as a tool to encourage the debanking of certain legal industries and law-abiding citizens for political reasons not tied to safety and soundness. Debanking is a top priority for this committee, and it certainly is for me, and one that I believe is a bipartisan issue. Will you commit to working with this committee to end debanking, including working with the new Vice Chair of Supervision, once appointed, to revise the Federal Reserve supervision manuals to remove reputational risk as a tool to weigh in on political topics?
I'm happy to make that commitment.
Thank you, sir. Accountability is very important. I would like to think accountability is a priority for everyone, especially the Fed, given that failures in Fed supervision can result in the loss of billions of dollars. Yet following the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank, which was in part due to the failures of its regulators to identify egregious mismanagement of interest rate and liquidity risks, we have yet to see any regulators be held accountable. And as you recall, that was a point of my frustration. As a guy who spent a lot of time in the private sector, 15 years running a few businesses, I can tell you that accountability is a necessary part of making the entire organization healthier and perform its job as well as possible. I'm encouraged that the FDIC has begun the process of holding SVB executives accountable. That's good news. But no Fed employee has been fired, put on probation, put on performance improvement plan, all of which would be expected in the private sector, as I just mentioned, for employee failure. Please explain to me why Fed employees are held to a different standard from my perspective than everyone else.
Answers
and
this,
what are you planning to do to take accountability
the way he answers
for Fed
this,
failures in supervision?
you'll see the market move.
So we've actually done quite a lot in response to the events associated with Silicon Valley Bank. So we've done many, many things.
Yep.
In terms
Gold's
of
gonna go
specific accountability, what we found was this was not a case of malfeasance or nonfeasance so much. It was a case of people were carrying out a specific playbook that failed to cause us to act in time for these things. So it wasn't actually particularly fair to the employees to say you violated our practices in some way. That wasn't really what happened. What happened was, I would say, a lot of focus on process and on governance and controls, and not enough focus on basic bread and butter banking, credit risk, liquidity risk, interest rate risk, things like that. So as we discussed yesterday, we took very substantial steps to avoid further spread of those issues, and that was successful. But I understand your point on accountability.
This is one of the areas where you see the approach to looking at safety and soundness, and with the number of MRAs that when really documented but no action was taken, that leads me to the conclusion that individual employees, supervisors, should have been held account for that. I'll move on though. In the past, you've supported tailoring regulations so that we ensure banks of different sizes thrive and to preserve our diverse banking system. Will you commit to working with me as chairman to make sure that financial regulations do not impose more burden than is necessary? I'll say that this comes after a number of conversations with community banks and regional banks that have continued to stress that the cost of the regulatory framework around them isn't just harsh, it's oppressive. Larger banks suggest that the cost per employee for the regulatory framework is $10,000 per employee. I think we can do better, and would love to hear your thoughts on that.
First of all, I will commit to working with you on that. We do try to avoid excessive burden. I think it's fair to take a fresh look on, frankly, on debanking. I think we all see, both in your hearing and in the one on the House side, we hear a lot of people talking about that. And, it's time to take a fresh look, I think. We don't intentionally do these things, but sometimes regulation leads things to happen, and we need to be working on that.
I appreciate that, and I'll turn it over to the ranking member. I'll say this, after having a number of conversations with CEOs of banks around the country, one of the things that was made clear to me with specific statement from the CEOs is that the regulatory, OCC and other regulatory agencies said specifically to debank certain industries, and that is the point that I'm making, and one that I think we have to solve. If it's legal in America to do business, we should do our part to make sure that they're banked.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So over the weekend, Co-President Musk and Acting Director Vogt effectively shut down the CFPB. No more cop on the beat looking out for a family of 4 in South Carolina facing an illegal foreclosure. No more cop on the beat looking out for your grandma whose bank account has just been taken over by a scammer. No more cop on the beat looking out for people getting ripped off by giant credit card companies that are charging illegal junk fees. It also means that the CFPB is no longer doing one of its most important jobs, examining big banks to root out illegal conduct before it happens, or at least stop it before more people get hurt. Chair Powell, if the CFPB isn't on the job right now, then who is administering JP Morgan or Wells Fargo's consumer compliance exams to ensure that they are following the law?
Senator, I believe that, and you would know, that Dodd-Frank moved all authority for examinations in the consumer space to the CFPB. We still have some jurisdiction.
We'll talk about that in a sec, but the answer to my question, please. If the CFPB is not there examining these giant banks to make sure they are following the laws on not cheating consumers, who is doing that job?
I can say no other federal regulator.
No one, in other words. So thanks to Co-President Musk and CFPB Acting Director Vogt, Wall Street banks no longer have to show the bank examiners that they're not illegally opening accounts people didn't ask for, like happened with Wells Fargo, or charging illegal junk fees like the Bank of America did. But CFPB has jurisdiction only on banks that have more than $10 billion in assets. So what's happening in thousands of community banks all around the country, those that have less than $10 billion in assets? So Chair Powell, as you know, the Fed oversees consumer compliance for state member banks that have less than $10 billion in assets. Has the Fed suspended consumer compliance exams for those smaller banks, or is the Fed still on the job to make sure that those smaller banks are following consumer financial laws?
Still on the job, business as usual.
All right. By forcing the CFPB not to do its job, President Trump, Elon Musk, and the author of Project 2025, Russ Vought, are giving Wall Street banks an unlimited get-out-of-jail-free card so they can cheat working families, even while community banks continue to play by the rules. You know, for any Americans who have money deposited at JP Morgan or Wells Fargo or any other of the giant banks, they should now know that there is no one on the job to make sure that those banks are not scamming you. Only the smaller banks now have a cop on the beat to make sure that they aren't cheating consumers. You know, if I had my money in one of those giant banks, I might think about going to a smaller bank where the protection, at least right now, is a whole lot better. Now, at the same time that the CFPB is under attack, the Fed is buckling to pressure from Wall Street to erase other safeguards
Powell makes us worried.
for the
She's
too
making
big
Powell
to
worried.
fail banks. During the first Trump administration, under your leadership, the Fed
Whoever she
weakened
is,
the big bank stress test.
she's going at him hard.
Including by
No diddy.
giving the big banks some of the answers
I like
to
the way
test
she's
in
addressing him.
advance. I called you out on it, but you promised right here in this committee that you would not give those banks the whole answer key. I'm going to quote you back. You said, complete knowledge of the models could lead to a model monoculture in which all firms have similar internal stress testing models, which could increase the correlation of risk in the system and miss key idiosyncratic risks faced by the firms. I agreed with you. But several weeks ago, the Fed announced that it has plans to do exactly that.
Ask your
Hand
question.
all of the answers over to the giant banks. Chair Powell, why is the Fed about to propose a rule that directly contradicts your own testimony and, in your own words, would render the stress tests toothless?
Senator, in essence, because the ground has shifted very substantially in administrative law, and we actually want the stress test to remain resilient to that, and so we're making changes to accomplish that.
Well, the changes are changes you've identified earlier.
Look at his body
as
language.
making those
He's
tests
nervous.
Toothless.
He's sitting
Look,
on his
the big
hands.
banks are going to juice shareholder payouts and leave this economy more vulnerable to a crash. The Fed is knuckling under to bank lobbyists. We know how this ends. People will suffer. Wall Street will get bailed out. I urge you, Chair Powell, to serve Main Street instead of Wall Street. Don't weaken these rules.
Thank you. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming before the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. I've got a series of questions, but I would like to give you an opportunity, if you would like. The suggestion that the ranking member has made here is that the big banks can now scam individuals right now. Any change in the laws regarding how they're supposed to be treating the individual consumers out there or anything along that line?
Law changes? No, I'm not aware of any
Any
law
changes in any rules that they would have to follow?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are they still audited, and do they still have the
now he's fidgeting
regulators
with his
in
thumbs.
watching all of their businesses just as they did before?
Well, they'd have all the regulators except for the CFPB.
Very good.
If in fact, that in the hypothetical, the CFPB weren't carrying that out.
He's nervous.
Anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we continue to prioritize the stability and the resilience of our financial system, the ongoing Basel III rulemaking process has remained front and center in shaping our regulatory framework. Now, I guess I was rather outspoken with my opposition to the original proposal, and
He
further
was
work
nervous.
was
He was
stalled at the end
he
of
was
the
sitting on
last
his
year.
hands when she was talking,
My-
and then
I
when
guess
this
my
guy was
question for you
talking,
today, sir,
he's there
could you
twiddling,
provide an
playing with his
update
thumbs.
on the Federal Reserve's progress in finalizing the
He's
Basel
nervous.
III endgame rulemaking process?
Gold's. Look, I
I'd be
told you
glad to.
Gold's gonna.
So we remain
up.
committed to completing
Let's see how
Basel
high it
III
goes.
endgame. We think it's good for U.S. banks. It's good for our economy that there be a global standard beneath which foreign banks can't fall. And that was one of the big ideas behind the whole Basel Committee approach. So where it sits now is we await leadership arriving at the OCC and the FDIC, and that seems to be happening. And when that happens, we're going to sit down with
Uncertainty.
them.
Gold's gonna
and
go
work
up.
our way through to a Basel III endgame proposal, and I think we can do this reasonably quickly. One that is compliant, consistent with the Basel requirements, and also consistent with what other large jurisdictions are doing. I'm optimistic that we can do that fairly quickly, and we're committed to doing that.
We always wanted our banks to be competitive with European banks, and I'm just curious, the original proposal that
What's
was
his
in front of you,
background?
and I'd like your thoughts on
I'm
this.
gonna be
It was
honest,
estimated to
I don't
increase
really know.
our bank's capital by 19%.
I
which
should look it
I
up.
think may very well have created a potential
I don't know.
disadvantage with.
I just know
within
when
the
he
US
talks,
institutions
good or
versus our
bad,
European counterparts. With any new proposal,
The markets move.
what's
He has
your
to do with the
thoughts?
Federal
Would you make a
Reserve, if I'm
commitment
not
that this would be
mistaken.
a neutral approach with regard to capital?
The main commitment I'll make is we'll work together with new leadership at the other banking agencies to do something. But that's certainly You know, I've
Look
said
at his
many times
hands.
in this committee that I think that the level of capital in the largest banks is about right, and so it'll shake out somewhere in that area, I would
Our
guess. But
expectation would be, and the markets would expect, that it would be neutral with regard to capital.
in that range, but I want to defer to our new colleagues and get their views as well. But that's a good starting place.
He's
Okay,
calm,
thank
but
you.
he's uncomfortable.
The Federal Reserve's partnership with the U.S. Treasury plays a central role in supporting our nation's payment infrastructure, which processes a vast range of daily transactions, from federal benefit disbursements to debt obligations. Could you outline the Federal Reserve's role in supporting and managing the Treasury's payment systems, including how the Fed works to keep these systems secure, efficient, and capable of handling the government's high volume of daily transactions?
So it's a complicated set.
He's
of
the chair
arrangements,
of the
and
Federal
I'll try
Reserve.
to summarize quickly. Effectively,
So the U.S.
Congress
money.
authorizes spending, and then the agencies carry out those spending orders. And when the way they do that is they send an order to pay a payee, a recipient, to the Treasury Department. Upstream, before it gets to the Fed, all of these decisions are made about, is this an appropriate order? Is this payee on the don't pay list, and all those things. Once all of that is set, it comes to the Fed, and by that I mean 4 or so of the reserve banks, and we actually make the payment. We take the money out of the Treasury General account and we make the payment. We make no judgments whatsoever. Those are all made upstream from us, and we are in fact the fiscal agent of the Treasury.
Confirm for me today, is the system safe today?
I believe it is, and I will tell you, we are very strongly committed to the integrity, efficacy, resilience, and all those things of this system. And you know, people do depend on this in a big way, and we're committed to that.
One last question for you, sir. The failure of Silicon Valley Bank, and the chairman brought this up. I'm just curious, recognizing a lot of banks out there looked at this, it cost the other banks in the system a lot of money to pick up the costs involved in the losses. Nobody's been fired, but you did indicate that it was a failure in the playbook. Has the playbook been revised, or can we expect that it will be revised?
In a lot of ways, it's been revised, yes. I can go into some details. I mean, one thing that didn't happen was, for example, the supervisors didn't follow through aggressively enough on things that they'd said. If they'd done that could well have been enough to stop it. But a lot of it was just not focusing enough directly on what was a very large amount of interest rate risk, a large portfolio of long-term securities matched up with an unstable funding base. And somehow people wrote about that, and not the Fed, but others wrote publicly about this, but somehow we don't expect bank runs outside of a crisis in this country, and that's what that was. It was a bank run, and bank runs are incredibly damaging. I think everyone learned a lot from that and is determined to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this
Yes.
is one that I think, as you
Good point.
appropriately pointed out,
I
think
believe.
this is an area where
Instead of
a lot
yes.
more questions are out there yet, and I think if it's the playbook that was the problem, I think perhaps
Those
a
little
discussion about
details,
how that
Fahad,
playbook has been revised would be appropriate. in the
you
future.
paying
Thank
attention
you,
to
Mr.
those
Chairman.
details
Thank you. Senator Cortez.
is very
Masto.
important. So good catch.
Chairman Powell,
See
thank you,
gold?
and thank
It's
you
like, yeah,
always,
nah,
for the
we don't
conversations, in between these
have
hearings
confidence.
as well. Let me focus on a couple of things of concern, and you touched on a little bit of this, and I think this is important to clarify. There was a change in the law when the CFPB was created. The CFPB examines the banks and enforces the law, whereas the Fed only supervises those banks. Is that correct? Or how would you determine that relationship?
With the CFPB? So Dodd-Frank took a lot of the consumer compliance jurisdiction away from the other banking agencies and gave it to a newly created agency, the CFPB. We retained a residual amount of that, as we just discussed, which was banks under $10 billion in assets. But the CFPB essentially took all of that when Dodd-Frank came into being.
So as it was created, when you two were working together, the Federal Reserve collaborated with the Consumer Bureau when supervising those large banks, correct?
Yes, we still retain supervision over all the holding companies and also of Fed member banks.
And let me ask you this then, does the Federal Reserve enforce consumer protection laws now for things like money transmitters?
not for money, for.
That would
for-
be the consumer
for Fed
protection, that would be
member banks.
CFPB.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
And
right.
so when we're talking about collaborating with the CFPB for financial technology firms, what would the Fed Reserve now do that if the CFPB, if the hypothetical is the CFPB no longer exists, what would be the Fed's role right now with respect to technology firms?
We don't have jurisdiction over, we have jurisdiction over banks and some
And
financial
that's
market
it.
utilities.
So let me ask you this, because I know there's a number of Nevadans who file consumer reports of concerns about fraud and predators with the CFPB. The Fed Reserve doesn't receive those reports, correct?
No, I don't believe so.
And you have no role when it comes to consumer protection like the CFPB does, correct?
Unless you're a Fed member bank that has 10 billion or less in assets, then we have jurisdiction.
Right.
On a
So there is
consumer.
a gap. If the hypothetical is true, and what we're hearing that the CFPB is being shut down, there is a gap, what we're hearing in enforcement out there, and particularly when it comes to consumer protection. Is that, would you say that's true?
Yes, for all banks that we don't
Yeah.
supervise.
And I think that's the concern we're all having right now, is this concern of when we're looking to streamline government. And listen, I'll be the first to tell you, there's a lot of bloat. We need to streamline it. We need to address regulations and overreach. But there's a strategic way to do it, and not this burn down the house that is going to harm people across the country, including in my state, those Nevadans that are looking for some sort of enforcement around consumer protection laws. So that's what you're hearing from many of us on our side of the aisle here.
Can I just very briefly add that we do have some residual enforcement authorities, but what we don't have is examination authority, and for the banks that the CFPB supervises.
Thank you. Let me ask you this, and you know, we talked about this over the phone, and I understand it may be difficult to answer this, but the Federal Reserve Board members have been clear that future interest rate cuts are unlikely to happen despite the strong economy.
Yeah.
There are folks in my home that are.
I don't know what I
in my
expected
state
his
that are
voice to
waiting
sound like, but
buy
I
a
didn't expect
home.
it to sound like this.
And we know that's still an issue.
But he
with
looks
the high
what I
prices
thought
right now
someone in
for
his
home
position would look like.
affordability. You add
An
the
old
interest
white
rates
guy.
to it, it is a problem.
That's exactly what I pictured.
So do you think it's most likely that interest rates will remain above 6% for this year, or can you even address that?
You know, so overall, the economy is strong, growing 2.5% last year. The labor market is also very solid. Unemployment at 4%.
Watch his
quite
eyes.
a low level. Inflation last year was 2.6% for the year. So we're in a pretty good place with this economy. We want to make more progress on inflation, and we think our policy rate is in a good place, and we don't see any
He
reason
keeps
to be in a
looking down
hurry to
instead of
reduce
straight at
inflation.
her.
As it relates to housing, so it's true that mortgage rates have remained high, but that's not so directly related to the Fed's rate. It's really related more to long-term bond rates, particularly the Treasury, the 10-year Treasury, 30-year Treasury, for example. And those are high for reasons not particularly closely related to Fed policy. They may remain high. I think, you know, once we lower rates and kind of rates return to a lower level, mortgage rates will come down. I don't know when that'll happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And even when it does
His
happen, we
eyes
still
do
have
exactly what
housing
yours do when
shortages
you
in
talk to
places.
someone.
Thank you.
When you
Chairman
speak
Powell, thank you
without
again for being here.
confidence and uncertainty.
Thank you, ma'am. Next will be Senator
Because when I talk to
Kennedy.
someone, I stare at them directly in the eyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for
Because I'm
being
speaking
here.
with confidence.
My friend, our ranking member, said that you are knuckling under to the big bank lobbyists. Is that true?
No.
It seems to me that the big picture should not go unnoticed. Do you recall a year or two ago when
He's going to give him shit.
inflation was raging?
Gold's going
I
to
think its peak was
go
about 9%.
sky high.
Many economists and other experts, based in part on history, said that you were going to have to provoke high unemployment and put our country into recession in order to get inflation down. Do you recall that?
Very, very well.
Are we in a recession?
We are not.
He just lied.
Would
He just lied.
you, as an American, trade places right now with Germany in terms of the economy?
No, I sure wouldn't.
How about China?
No, wouldn't trade places.
How about France?
He's
No,
lying.
thanks.
He's trying to keep his hands still.
Things aren't perfect. Inflation's obviously still sticky, and long rates are too high, which I want to talk about in a second. But the fact is, knock on wood, we have experienced a soft landing, haven't we?
Not for me to say, really.
Yep.
I'll let others
Well,
make
have we
that.
experienced a hard landing?
No, we sure
Are
haven't.
we in a recession?
No, we're not.
I call that a soft landing.
He can't
And it
say
seems to
that we
me
are,
that you
even though
and
we are.
some of the ladies and gentlemen who are your colleagues at the Federal Reserve behind you deserve some credit for that.
Thank you.
I don't know why you don't take the credit. Everybody else in Washington, D.C. does. Again, I'm not saying things are perfect.
Damn, now he doesn't giving any extra sauce. He's like sat in front of a
I
shotgun.
never imagined that
Why
our
is he trying
landing
to refuse?
could be this
He's
soft,
trying to play nice guy.
albeit not perfect. And I wanted to thank you and your colleagues for that effort. You sure didn't get any help from Congress and on the and our president on the fiscal side. I don't expect you to comment on that. You and the Federal Reserve can to a large extent control short rates, can't you?
Yes.
Through the open market committee. You can't control long rates, though, can you?
No, we can't.
Why is that?
So a lot of things go into long rates, and one of them is the expected future short rate of Fed policy, but many, many other things go in. Expectations of inflation in the longer run.
Him answering this question,
sort
you
of
can tell he's
risks
comfortable.
around the
'Cause he knows the
economy and
answer.
around
It's
the
like
budget
saying,
deficit
you know,
go into something called the
How do you
term
make your
premium,
cereal
which
in the
is
morning?
part we
Well,
can't
let me explain
explain,
that to you. It's very easy.
when we do these decompositions. And so, you know, it's set by supply and demand in the bond market at the long end, and we're not particularly, we have some influence, but mostly not.
Many Americans are looking at short rates and looking at the Fed's behavior and how you reduce inflation, but they don't seem.
Look at the way that
they
this
don't
guy's
see the
sitting.
long rates going down, and obviously
Sitting
that
calm,
affects
confident.
mortgage rates.
Yeah, I just
And
got questions to
I would
ask,
encourage you and your colleagues to
and I'm going to direct them
spend some time explaining
with
to the American
confidence.
people
Look at the way he's sitting.
why
He's
that
leaning
is.
a little bit,
Final
sure.
question.
Even the people behind him, they're sitting comfortable.
If you went home tonight,
And then look at how Powell's
And,
body language is.
Mayor Powell, your spouse,
Yeah, and I get it.
said, you know, I
He's
got a
in the
call
spotlight,
today
and there's a
from my
lot of
bank.
pressure on him, right? Like the whole world
And
is
they're,
watching him. He says the
they're
wrong
debanking
thing,
us.
and things go the wrong way.
they're worried about their reputational
So there's a lot of
risk
pressure on him.
because they don't
but-
like our politics.
If you're confident in what you're doing,
Would you think
you don't
that
care
fair?
about that.
No, I sure wouldn't. And as I mentioned earlier, I too am troubled by the quantity of these reports, and you know, really want to understand better why this is happening. You know, one theory is that banks are just very risk averse around BSA and money laundering, and that's because we're so tough on them, and that they just don't. Any red flag is enough. But you know, it may be that this whole thing with reputation risk needs to be thought about. It's actually coming out of our one manual that we use. We're taking that concept out, the manual that we've been using for account access, for master accounts. We're just going to take that out.
So they're
But
going to change
I think
policies.
This needs a fresh look, and I think it's time for that, and we're going to do that.
Well, I've asked our chairman, and he has agreed to invite some of the CEOs of some of the banks that have been debanking people, the CEOs.
Yes.
not their lawyers, not their PR consultants,
Not the lobbyists.
not their priests, them, the CEOs, to come in and let's talk about this and find out what the hell's been going on.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Reed.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. Chairman Powell, welcome. Thank you very much. I think your monetary policy combined with the Biden fiscal policy over the last 4 years has made a tremendous difference. We've avoided a recession. And I'd like to remind people how far we've come. In 2020, the gross domestic product decreased 2.2%. The unemployment rate finished the year at 6.7%. By 2024, gross domestic product grew 2.5%. The unemployment rate was 4.1%. Labor force participation rate went up from 61% to 62.5%. And that's a combination of your work together with the fiscal policy of the Biden administration. So I thank you for that. One of the issues before us today is the issue of tariffs. In July 2018 testimony, you stated, Mr. Chairman, countries that have remained open to trade, that have not erected barriers, including tariffs, have
You can't
grown
unsee it
faster
now.
and higher incomes. Do you still believe that?
Yes, I do. I would stand by that.
So President Trump's tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico will obviously raise costs on families. In fact, some economists, many economists, project about $1,200 per year households will be paying extra. An increase of inflation by nearly 1%, economic growth depression, and, for example, the increase of the average car price by $2,700. Is that a wise policy?
So I guess I ought to say this. You know, I think the standard case for free trade and all that logically still makes sense. It didn't work that well when we have one very large country that doesn't really play by the rules. And in any case, it's not the Fed's job to make or comment on tariff policy.
That's fair.
You know, really, that's for elected people, and it's not for us to comment. Ours is to try to react to it in a thoughtful, sensible way and make monetary policy so that we can achieve our mandate.
Just this weekend, the president removed the board of the Kennedy Center and made himself chairman. What would you do if the president tried to remove a member of the Federal Reserve Board?
Well, it's pretty clearly not allowed under the law.
Thank you. We've communicated back
other
and
words,
forth about
I'm not
synthetic
going
risk
anywhere. That's what he
transfer
just said.
as a potential danger to the banking system. And could you give us some insights on how we can improve financial stability by regulating these transactions more appropriately?
So what we've been doing for some time now is looking at them on a case-by-case basis. And if they really do transfer risk successfully, then that's okay. I mean, you know, it's a good thing if a bank wants to transfer risk off its balance sheet in a way that it gets compensated for and all that. But what you want to make sure is that the risk is really transferred, and that was the problem during the global financial crisis. Was sort of things that appeared to but did not accomplish a transfer of risk. So we see this coming, and we've been looking at these transactions on an ongoing basis.
Well, I commend you for that. In fact, what happens typically is the transaction becomes complicated by synthetic risk transfers, as it was the case with synthetic derivatives. So thank you for your attention to that. We've talked about housing. It's absolutely critical everywhere across the country. We're in a housing shortage. Of course, while housing is difficult, two of the mainstays of our housing market are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, helping to support home ownership. Does the federal guarantee backing Fannie and Freddie help make mortgage rates more affordable and home ownership more accessible, Mr. Chairman?
I imagine it does hold down mortgage rates, the fact that they're a sovereign risk.
And how important is the 30-year mortgage to ensure that families can afford a home?
In our housing market, the 30-year mortgage is very important.
Yeah. And I have heard some discussions about eliminating Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which would be detrimental, I presume, to the housing market.
That's really a question for you. You know, I mean, putting them back in the private putting housing finance back in the private sector has some appeal over the longer run, but I leave that with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Ricketts.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing, and thank you, Chairman Powell, for being here today to talk about our economy and all the things that are going on. I want to address, again, something that the Ranking Member started talking off about, which was characterizing the CFPB as being the cop on the beat here. But I can tell you, as having been a governor and having a Department of Banking that reported to me, that if any consumer would contact us and make a complaint about a bank, even a big bank like JP Morgan, we would investigate, as could the OCC, the FDIC, the FTC. So to characterize that nobody's out there looking for consumers, I think is inaccurate. And we ought not to try and scare consumers right now that somehow this is the case, because if you do have an issue, if you're a consumer, please reach out to your State Department of Banking, because those folks are going to look out for you. I can tell you that because I used to have one of those Department of Bankings. They did a fantastic job of looking out for the consumers. One of the things that has also impacted consumers is inflation. Prices under the Biden administration were up 20%. An average household is paying $13,000 more today than they were for the same standard of living they had before Joe Biden got elected. We see that grocery prices, for example, are up 22%, rents up 23%. Simply put, Nebraskans are economically worse off today than they were 4 years ago, and I expect that that's part of the reason why we saw this change in the administration. They thought that that was not something that they wanted to continue to pursue. They didn't want the same policies being followed. We have to end the reckless federal spending, rein in inflation, and be responsible about how we make decisions to be able to grow the economy. One of those areas that I'm concerned about is the expansion of the Fed balance sheet. The Fed's balance sheet before, at the end of 2019, so before the pandemic, was about $4.1 trillion. By May of 2020, the Fed expanded that to $7 trillion, and by 2022, the Fed's balance sheet hit an all-time record of $8.9 trillion. Inflation peaked at 9.1% that year, a high we had not seen since 1981. Now, I'm encouraged by the actions the Fed has taken with quantitative tightening to shrink the balance sheet down to $6.85 trillion, but $6.85 trillion is still too high. And one of my concerns with this, Chairman, is that that's kind of one of your tools to be able to guard against a downturn in the economy or some sort of shock. You obviously used it during the pandemic. Looking ahead long term, will the Fed Reserve continue to this course of unwinding the balance sheet?
They'll do what's necessary.
Yes, so what we said is that we intend to slow and then stop the decline when reserve balances are somewhat above the level that we judge consistent with so-called ample reserves. The most recent data and the feel of the markets is definitely that reserves are still abundant. They're about the level they were at when runoff started, because the runoff has really happened out of the overnight repo facility, reverse repo. So yes, it's an ongoing thing, and we're not yet where we're headed.
So what kind of pace can we expect? And I know that obviously there's what happens to the economy over the course of next year. But if things were going to go along the way they are today, you've already said the economy's doing well. Inflation's a little higher than we want it to be at 2.6%, but unemployment's at 4%. If these commissions, and I think you used the word stable quite a bit, if these conditions were to remain stable throughout the course of the year, would you have a range that you could give us of where the balance sheet might be if we were talking again here in January 2026?
Basically, we're going to be looking at reserve conditions in reserve markets, and trying to stop a little bit above what we consider ample. And we think we're meaningfully above that now. We can't put a number on it because you can't directly know the demand for reserves other than by observing behavior in the market and then putting a little bit of a buffer on it. So I can't give you an exact number, but for now it's
He's
ongoing,
answering this
and,
with more confidence than
What
other
kind of
people.
conditions would have to happen for you to start going back to quantitative easing?
So go to quantitative easing. That's a tool we tend to use when we're at the effective lower bound and we can't cut interest rates anymore. So nothing like what you're seeing in the current day. It's a different test for stopping.
See his hands?
Quantitative
They're not
tightening,
really
but
fidgeting
we
as
would
much
use
as before.
QE going forward only in a situation
And his
where
posture is-
rates are at zero and
he has
we're a long
horrible
way from
posture,
zero
but
now.
So
He's
that
speaking
you
with
think
more
that if-
confidence.
Again, just generally speaking, then
He's not really
if
like
things were to remain stable, you'll continue
fidgeting
to
around or
unwind the
anything like
balance
that.
sheet. You'll continue the quantitative tightening. Can't give me a range on this. Is that what I hear you saying?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, great. Well, I encourage you to keep doing that because, again, I think that's important to be able to make sure that you've got powder for the next issue that we may face. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here.
Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, good to see you. One of the things we've talked about in the past, and I've got 2 or 3 issues I want to get through fairly quickly, is that that while our regulatory framework should always promote financial innovation, that innovation can't come at the expense of things like anti-money laundering, consumer protection, financial stability. I continue to worry in many of these hearings where we keep seeing this regulatory creep outside the boundaries of traditional financial regulation. I think if we were starting a system from scratch, few of us would design it this way. But it is one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to working with Chair Scott and my colleague, Senator Lummis, on a framework at looking at stable coins in particular within the regulatory perimeter.
Crypto.
I know my friend Bill Haggerty just introduced a bill in this area. I'm looking at trying to make sure we get those guardrails put in place, and how it touches the Fed is something that's terribly important to me. I know you and I have talked in the past about the notional idea of same activity, same regulation in the non-bank sector. If you'd like to wax briefly on this question around stable coins and how we think about them in the same point of, if they are similar to other activities, should they not have the same regulatory structure?
So we definitely support these efforts to create a regulatory framework around stablecoins. Stablecoins may have a big future with consumers and businesses. We can't know that now, but
more regulations.
It's important for the development of stablecoins in a safe and sound
Not
manner,
good for
and
crypto.
a manner that protects consumers and savers and all. That there be a regulatory framework. So we see these bills and we're in contact as we were in the last Congress and trying to add our technical thoughts and how to do this. And we think it's a very constructive exercise.
Well, we do think, you have a lot of expertise in this session, and there are people come with lots of opinions on everything in crypto, from over the top to the other end of the spectrum, and I'm gonna need to rely on your expertise as well as we try to work through some framework for stable coins. I know there are a lot of earlier questions on CFPB. I think the record is pretty darn good. It's returned $20 billion to consumers. Matter of fact, the last time we had the previous chair here, Chair Rohit, Mr. Chopra, we were talking about $55 million to Virginians. I do have to mention this more for my colleagues. Tim Kaine and I did a teletown hall last night. Lots of things happening in Virginia. Normally, we would get maybe 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 folks on a teletown hall. We had 60,000 last night. I have not seen anything like that.
He's relaxing him. He's relaxing me. I need more coffee.
Here on the Hill. And a huge
And
amount of concern
I thought,
about what
like, me
the
speaking
Doge
in a
boys are
monotone was
doing,
boring.
whether our information is safe, whether privacy is protected. I had one lady say, in light of what was happening at CFPB, and while there's not a direct
He
connection,
reminds me of William
she's
Dafoe.
saying, is her deposits at her bank safe? We tried to give her a assurance, but I said, you know what, ma'am, I'm going to be talking to the chairman of the Federal Reserve tomorrow. And with this diminution or shuttering, at least at the time being, of the CFPB, can I tell, I believe her name was Mary, can I tell Mary from Virginia?
Multiverse of madness.
I think bank accounts overall
The Green
across
Goblin.
the economy are safe. Yes, we've still got deposit insurance at the FDIC, and the banking system is well capitalized and safe.
Well, again, I think the concern was being raised was that the diminution of consumer protections lent her concerns about whether that dollar being safe. Last thing I want to recognize is that, there's been reports in the media about the thinness in the treasury markets, the number of additional bonding that we're going to have to do, particularly if with so many of these unpaid tax cuts. Matter of fact, one of the things that was really striking to me was that yesterday the president mentioned how he was, quote, examining treasury debt payments for possible fraud and suggested that our debt might not be as high as possible. We all understand the full faith and credit of the United States is based upon a reputation. If this president were to suddenly say, I'm wiping off X amount of debt because I don't believe we owe it, what kind of effect would that have on both stability of the dollar and the overstability of our economy?
Good question.
It will probably not surprise you that I will defer to you on that question.
So you think it would be, from a Fed standpoint, the President of the United States starts to saying we're not going to pay our treasury debt, you're going to have no view at all?
I'm not going to comment on things that the president says.
Not good.
I would like to see us at some point get a stronger answer on that, because I think that in light of the president's willingness to shut down agencies
Uncertainty.
willy-nilly, his ability to potentially curtail
Lack of
payment debt,
accountability.
I think would have devastating consequences on
Hey,
our
if we
economy.
checked your
Thank you, Mr.
books,
Chairman.
Senator Britt.
what we owe, and we say
Thank you,
like,
Mr. Chairman.
don't
Obviously,
believe
there's
some of
been
this.
a lot of conversation both in and
would
out
you
of
be
this hearing
open to
room
having the
today.
conversation and these no comments?
Conversations about a co-president
Watch
referencing
gold.
Elon Musk,
Watch gold
referencing
go
the
up.
work that Doge is doing. I think it's important to remember that President Trump ran on this. I mean, he said we're going to look for wasteful spending across our government. We're $36 trillion in debt, y'all. That's not only fiscally irresponsible, it is actually morally irresponsible. And the difference in this administration and the last administration is that President Trump is actually the final arbiter. And it's interesting that none of you had anything to say over the last 4 years when it is clear that our commander-in-chief was not in command. And if we're going to use the term co-president, then let's go back and say co-president Jake Sullivan, co-president Ron Klain, co-president Jill Biden. I mean, it seems that some of the biggest decisions were made during the president's afternoon nap time. And so I just think we need to be a little bit more honest about what's been laid out and what's actually occurring. Chair Powell, I want to discuss some monetary policy issues, but I first want to highlight a few
If he would have
supervisory
said,
items. We unfortunately started 2023 with
let's
several
look at
big
everything,
failures in which the
and we
Fed
can
itself
prove
admits its supervisors
whatever
were,
we've got.
quote, too slow to ask. The question has been asked earlier about
That's
who
different.
was fired, who was not. I think that there's some real merit to having accountability that we have not seen there. In the aftermath of those failures, the Fed was certainly not slow to act when it came to new regulations, like the new capital requirements that would have put the U.S. banks at a global disadvantage and actually hurt consumers in my state. The way I look at this is the world came up with a gold standard, and then Vice Chair Barr said, hold my beer. And unfortunately, that hurts Alabamians. In addition to that, we had Community Reinvestment Act and stress testing frameworks that were basically adopted in secret, or as we discussed last week, the reputational risk and just the arbitrary nature of that and those standards that were used to push political agendas. None of this is acceptable, and we've got to take a look at how to promote greater accountability and transparency into the Fed's supervisory function. Shifting gears, as of January 30th, the Federal Reserve had a mark-to-market loss on its balance sheet of roughly $221 billion. In fact, I looked back and the Fed has posted losses since September of 2022. Meanwhile, we've seen transfers to the CFPB totaling $2 billion since September of 2022. So just to clarify, Chair Powell, these money transfers are requested by the CFP director,
What do you mean, what the?
each quarter,
What the what?
and then directly deposited by the Fed. Is that how that works?
So the director of the CFPB requests money, and we, under the law, we send that money, yes.
So, in fact, but Dodd-Frank actually prohibits the Fed from actually reviewing or amending those requests.
That is correct.
And so it gives full discretion to the CFPB
Up to,
director.
I think, 12% of our there's a ceiling on that, but that's correct.
So just to level set, how many times, has the CFPB funding request been denied by the Fed?
We don't have the authority
Zero.
to deny it under the law.
Zero, right?
Zero, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And by the way, I'd like to applaud the current administration and acting director vote for inserting some accountability back into the agency by pausing these
He basically
quarterly
said,
blank
we have no control
checks. On that, I know there's been
over
a lot
that
of
topic.
conversation around the Bureau over the last few days, but I do want to focus on those last couple of years, particularly the $2 billion the CFPB received from September 2022 up to the last receipt on January 2nd, 2025. Congress specified in statute that the Fed shall fund the CFPB through the combined earnings of the Federal Reserve System. However, as I mentioned, the Fed has no current earnings. It has a balance sheet of negative $200 billion. So instead of the recent audit statement saying the Fed is funding the CFPB through assessments on its reserve banks, Mr. Chair, there are only two statutes that authorize the Fed to make reserve bank assessments, and neither permit the CFPB to fund transfers. So what authority exactly did the Federal Reserve have to assess the reserve banks in this manner over the last 2 years? I just wanted kind of a fact-finding.
We looked at that question very carefully, and it's very clear on the law and the legislative history that we're still required to make those payments to do so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would point out that candidate Trump did not run on implementing Project 2025. In fact, when he was asked on the campaign trail about Project 2025, he said, I don't know anything about that. Who are those people? And yet he early on and quickly installed a key architect of Project 2025, Russ Vought, as the head of the Office of Management and Budget, which we know is the command and control center for the budget overseeing all federal agencies. And that's what Elon Musk is doing now. He's implementing Project 2025, the same Project
Back
2025
to investigating.
that candidate Trump said he knew nothing about. And he said that because he knew it was unpopular. He knew it would be unpopular to take the financial cop off the beat. And I want to start by talking about what's happening over at CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because that is the cop on the beat to go after fraudsters and scammers who cheat Americans out
Watch
of their
him get
hard-earned
nervous
money.
because
And they have
for
returned
sure he
billions of
can't
dollars
handle or answer
to our
if they
constituents,
investigate
to the
their
consumers
books.
who have been victims of these scams.
Like with a
And in
magnifying
doing
glass.
so, they've earned some powerful
He avoided that question.
enemies who want to shut them down. And Elon Musk is
Watch
doing
his hands and his
that
eyes.
dirty work on behalf of those fraudsters. And there's something especially twisted about the richest man in the world shutting down an agency that helps victims of scammers and fraudsters recover just a little bit of their hard-earned money. And I find it especially interesting that the new self-declared head of the CFPB, Russell Vought, told employees not to come into the office and essentially to stop work. Here's what he wrote, and I'm quoting, "Employees should not come into the office," unquote, and stand down from performing any work task, unquote. So this is an interesting situation. Federal employees continue to get paid, but the Trump administration tells them to stop doing their work. That apparently is what the Trump administration thinks is a good deal for the American taxpayer, to pay employees not to do their job. So, Mr. Chairman, I have a simple question for you. Is that a practice that you pursue at the Fed, to pay your employees but tell them not to come to work? Have you done that?
No.
That wouldn't be very efficient, would it?
No.
No, it wouldn't. And yet, that's what the so-called Doge boys, efficiency boys, are doing. In addition to that, they're rummaging through the private, very personal, sensitive information of Americans at the Department of Treasury. So it seems to me that the Trump administration and Elon Musk are focused on everything except what Donald Trump said he was going to focus on during the campaign, which was to bring prices down. And when you look at the price of eggs these days, I noticed that Waffle House just instituted a new 50-cent per egg surcharge due to the nationwide rise in the cost of eggs. They said that's going to be a new surcharge, and other restaurants are following suit. You've seen that, right, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And at the same time, the Trump administration has restricted federal agencies from providing the public with information about the bird flu, avian flu, which is part of the cost of egg increases. So what we're really facing here is an administration that campaigned on bringing down prices and is not doing that, did not campaign on Project 2025, and that's what they're doing. But when it comes to prices, Mr. Chairman, the president's also talking about significant increases in tariffs. Our Republican colleagues are also talking about passing a tax bill that gives way disproportionately to the super wealthy, and which will add trillions to the deficit by their own account.
What's his question?
Talking about playing around with the baseline. So my question to you is simple. All things being equal, do big increases in tariffs and increasing the deficit and debt put upward pressure on inflation? Isn't that simple math?
You know, it really does remain to be seen what tariff policies will be implemented, and I just think it would be unwise to speculate when we really don't know. I mean, we see proposals, but it's so hard to say what's going to happen. And
Well, last time the Trump administration was in office, the Fed
That's
took
a fair
actions because they were concerned about the impact of increasing tariffs. Isn't that the case?
we wound up cutting rates in 2000 and I guess it was 19, but it really was because growth slowed and confidence was weak and the global economy was weakening. So the net effect of all that's what we look at. And it's really not just tariffs, it's tariffs, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulatory policy. And those will all go into a mix, and we'll try to make sense of it and do what's right for monetary policy.
If you could just get back to me, I'm not on the question of increasing the deficit by trillions of dollars.
Shut up.
What
Answer the
impact
question.
you believe that has on inflation and prices? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Senator Lummis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Chairman Powell, for being with us today. I think you're aware of what direction my questions will take. They will be focused on the bank supervision function of the Fed. And I'd point out that when you and I were toddlers, 1956, the chairman of the Fed at the time, William McChesney Martin, said that the Federal Reserve Board is an agency of the Congress. Ben Bernanke said something similar in 2013 when he told Janet Yellen that, quote, Congress is our boss. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, the way I always say it is that our supervision, our accountability runs through the legislative branch, not through the executive branch, as it does in many other forms of government.
Thank you for that, because I wouldn't have guessed that that was going to be your response. The way that the Fed has behaved for the last 4 years in its relationship with the U.S. Congress is to thumb its nose at Congress. Your staff has repeatedly stymied information requests from this committee, notably made by myself, the chairman, the ranking member, Senator Tillis, former Senator Pat Toomey, and others. In my experience, the Fed is a black hole. It consumes information, but it never releases it. Your fellow governors have personally misled me on at least 2 occasions with respect to Wyoming and digital assets.
Not good.
And in recent federal court filings, former Senator Pat Toomey has accused your staff of lying to him while providing technical assistance on legislation that passed in the National Defense Authorization Act in 2022.
She's going to fry him.
Now, I have behind me a statement by the Fed's general counsel, one of the staff that's sitting behind you today, who said, quote, "The Fed generally resists legislative prescriptions."
She's gonna
Now,
fry
to
him.
me, that's thumbing his nose
Here
at
we go,
Congress,
gold.
the very people that you and I just agreed you are responsible to and the people depend on. So this is why the American people think there's a deep state. This is why they think there are faceless bureaucrats.
She hasn't
making
even asked her
policy
question yet.
to hurt the very people of this country. Just look at the mess the Fed made of Silicon Valley Bank. And I contend that there is a lack of understanding that is deliberate on the part of the Fed with respect to digital asset policy. So the Constitution says
Crypto must be going up a
Congress
little bit.
is your boss, but somehow your staff have not gotten that message.
Nah, not really.
So, Chairman Powell, do you commit on behalf of yourself and the Federal Reserve staff to comply fully with all document demands issued by this committee in a timely manner?
Sure.
Will
Sure.
you instruct your staff to be complete in their responses and not to obstruct the oversight functions of this committee?
Sure is not a good answer.
You know, we always work with the committee to be responsive to your requests. Sometimes they're beyond our capacity to respond to, and we work with committee and with committee staff to do that, but we're always responsive to committee requests.
And
Well,
I'll
he's
look forward
alone
to
because he's
engaging with
the
you
guy,
when you feel that
right?
our requests,
There's no the people.
are
He's the guy.
outside of the scope of the oversight that we have over the Fed. Do you commit to disciplining or removing any staff that are found to have engaged in debanking
Let's see how he answers this.
activity, furthering Operation Choke Point 2.0, or other misconduct?
I can't make an open
Yep.
ended committed to
Gold's gonna go
to
up.
remove anybody, but I will tell you that I am struck, and my colleagues and I are struck by the growing number of cases of what appears to be debanking, and we're determined to take a fresh look at that. In fact, I took the thing that you showed during the debanking hearing. When I saw that,
Just missed my
we're
entry,
now
too.
taking that out of the manual. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's up.
Yep. Gold's gonna go
Senator
up.
Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, and thank you, Chair Powell, for being with us today. I appreciate your presence here. I'd like to start with the issue of the rising cost of home ownership, something that I know is of great interest to many of my colleagues on this committee. I know, Mr. Chair, that you care a lot about home ownership and making home ownership accessible and available to folks. My colleague, Senator Lummis, as well, many of the folks on my side of the aisle as well. And so I think this is something that we can agree on, that the rising cost of home ownership is a big challenge for our constituents, for Americans. And one of the big pressures, there are many, but one of the big pressures is the rising cost of home insurance. In Minnesota, families, seniors are struggling to manage a nearly 40% increase in home insurance rates. We've seen this over the last 7 years or so. And I know, Chair Powell, that you've told this committee in the past that rising cost of
His face innocent.
buying insurance for your home has been a source of inflation as we've been trying to manage inflation.
Kind of, yeah.
Now,
She's gonna bring up the LA
I
fires.
don't know anyone who doesn't see this crisis of rising insurance rates as being caused by extreme weather events. We've seen massive flooding in the southeastern United States. We've seen flooding in Minnesota. We've seen fires in the Mountain West in California. I mean, these are climate-related events. Then that's not a political position. That is just a fact. So, we've got banks that of course, require, understandably, that a homeowner provide insurance as a predicate for getting a mortgage.
The insurance
So
companies
there's a big question about what's going to happen when
canceled
insurance
policies
becomes
on
unaffordable
flooding
or
and
in some parts of
fires
the country
before
just
flooding and
literally
fires
not
happened.
available, and what impact that would have on the mortgage markets, on the value of American homes. Just last week, a new analysis from First Street showed that overall, the value of U.S. real estate could be reduced by $1.4 trillion, colleagues, over the next 30 years due to unaccounted for climate risk. That's the cost, the risk of not being able to afford home insurance because of these extreme weather events. And the prospect of trillions of dollars of property become uninsurable is clearly a recipe, it seems to me, for market instability, both in the rental as well as the mortgage market. So my question, Chair Powell, is given these trends, how do you think the Fed and how do you think we should be thinking about the challenges that these events are going to pose to insurance markets and to the overall financial stability of the economy? I'm asking you to comment specifically on climate change because I understand my colleagues on the other side of the aisle see that as a political question. It's more like what you see as the risk to financial stability here.
So let me quickly note that we don't regulate or supervise insurance companies for the most part, but we're seeing the same thing, which is both banks and insurance companies are pulling out of areas, coastal areas and things like that, or areas where there are a lot of fires. So what that is going to mean is that, you know, if you fast forward 10 or 15 years, there are going to be regions of the country where you can't get a mortgage, there won't be ATMs, there won't, you know, the banks won't have branches and things like that.
Right.
That's a possibility coming up down the road. It's not that the banks will stay there and keep making loans in the face of evidence of disaster, or that insurance companies will do right policies. They can cancel those policies every year.
Right.
So I think the risk is that they just won't be there and that people won't be able to get them. That's really the issue.
And it seems to me that that would be a massive source of instability in our economy overall if you were to see that kind of dramatic decline in home ownership, home values, not to mention the disruption that would occur if people literally couldn't be in their homes anymore.
So I think it's going to fall, if that happens, it'll fall on homeowners and
Right.
residents, but it'll also fall on state and local governments, you know, which you see happening now, where they're stepping in.
This is
in
fair,
states
a
where
fair response
insurance
because that's
is
really nothing to do with
going
him.
away. Private
But she's going to
insurance, you're seeing
redirect
states
it
step in because they
into
want
like
those areas to
you.
remain
What about you
prosperous.
guys and
I don't know that it's a
securing
financial
funds and
stability
banks and
issue,
stuff?
but it certainly will have significant economic consequences.
Well, certainly to try to figure out how to provide reinsurance as an example in the places where commercial insurance isn't available would be a massive impact on state budgets, if to follow your chain of thinking. And I know in this committee, I've heard some of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle talk about the challenges overall with flood insurance, just as an example, and the massive expense that would have for us as well. I raise this, colleagues, because I think that this is an important issue that we need to be paying attention to. I do think it has a fundamental impact on the overall health of our economy as we look not even down the road, but where we are right now. So I'm out of time. Thank you, Chair Powell. I have a question. You and I have talked quite frequently about my deep and keen interest in the Community Reinvestment Act, and I'll follow up with a question on that for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Haggerty?
Thank you, Chairman Scott.
So she didn't ask nothing.
Chairman Powell, it's good to see you here today. Welcome. I want to start by talking with you a bit about markets and inflation. Less than 6 months ago, you expressed some serious concerns about labor market weakness and the risk of persistent inflation. But since then, the FOMC has begun its easing cycle and cut its target rate by 100 basis points, as you mentioned in your opening remarks. Now, in the January meeting, the FOMC has telegraphed that it felt both the labor market and inflation have reached a point where you're comfortable maintaining its target range. And my question is this: the recent market data, including last week's strong
I have
jobs
no idea.
report, indicate that
What time
the
is it now?
economy is on
I
firm
didn't even
ground.
realize the time.
Indeed, swaps markets have begun to price in fewer and fewer cuts this year. And I just wanted to talk broadly about these market conditions that you see.
Whether it ends
Do
or
you see
not,
evidence of a higher neutral rate emerging at
10
this
minutes.
Yes, I mean, let me say.
I'll stay
there
on
was a lot
live
of
for another
reason to
10
be
minutes.
concerned about
Then
downside
I didn't realize
risk
it
in the
was
labor market
11:30
toward
already.
the middle of this year, but
Gotta
really
move
that
on with my day.
concern has diminished significantly. Labor market's very strong. I think the evidence is my own view.
I might have to
and there are
accept
many
that
different views on this, but is that
I just
the
missed
neutral
my
rate
entry.
will have risen meaningfully.
Like,
Very
I
hard
was
to be
so
precise
close.
about it from what it was. It was clearly very, very low before
Like,
the pandemic.
look at how close that is.
It extraordinarily low, historically so, but
08.63?
Yes, I think it's moved up, and many of my colleagues on the
08.86.
FOMC feel that
Like
way too.
20
Certainly seems
pips.
that way. I'd like to turn
Sorry,
now to
yeah. No,
what seems to
what
be a
the hell
very
am I talking
popular topic
Right.
right at this point, and that's the CFPB.
Two
In your
pips.
response to Senator
By 2
Britt's
pips.
question earlier, you confirmed that when the CFPB submits quarterly funding
By
requests,
2
the
pips.
Fed is not in a position to exercise any discretion over what the funds are used for. Is that correct?
As long as it's compliant with the law.
It just strikes me that the Fed is not in a position to hold the CFPB accountable for
And they say break
what
if
it
hurts,
does or
show
how it
them
spends
this.
its
Yeah,
money.
exactly.
Congress hasn't been allowed
By
to hold
2
the CFPB accountable
pips.
for what it does or how it
Waited
spends its
2
money.
hours
It looks like
to
no one
miss
has been able to hold the
entry by 2
CFPB
pips.
accountable at all. And now I hear,
While the
complaints
feds are
coming from
talking.
every corner, particularly from the other side, complaints about the excessive delegation of authority to a Republican CFPB director when this entity was intentionally created to be wholly unresponsive to elected officials. So I just find that quite rich. Before I close, I'd like to come to a point on climate, and particularly the Fed's forays into climate activism that have taken place over these past 4 years and the recent retrenchment that we've seen. It's one thing for the Fed to disassociate from its past climate activism in a press release, but to credibly claim that it's divorced itself from
By
partisan
2
climate
pips.
policies.
So
The Fed needs to do more
upsetting.
than just issue statements. It needs to actually end its climate policies. The Fed's independence from politics is a headline topic at the moment, of course. And while much attention has been given to potential external pressures on the Fed, I think it's also critical that we scrutinize how the Fed's own regulation and supervision might be utilized to in some way politicize the institution. So when the central bank strays from its mandate by embracing partisan climate policies, the Fed embroils itself in controversial political debates and invites legitimate political scrutiny. So I just want to urge the Fed to refocus entirely on its core statutory mandates. I know it's a commitment that both you and I share, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
So he's just talking.
Thank you.
No
Senator
questions.
Warnock. Thank you very much, Chairman Scott, and welcome again, Chairman Powell. I
All
want
right.
to echo the words
The
of
black guy. You know he's going to
Ranking
give
Member
him a
Warren
hard time.
and so many of my colleagues today on Doge and Project 2025's illegal
Black people
attack
don't
on
play
the
around.
Consumer Financial
They don't got time for
Protection
nonsense.
Bureau. Certainly the Bureau was not created to be dismantled. And since its inception, the CFPB has been the only federal agency solely dedicated to protecting Americans' wallets and pocketbooks from scammers and predatory companies in financial services. The CFPB reduced costs for Americans, returning more than $21 billion to Americans who have been cheated since its
I don't know which
inception.
state
I want
he's
us
from.
to focus on that as folks are talking about chasing after waste and fraud and abuse. The CFPB has returned more than $21 billion to Americans. Make no mistake, this attack on the CFPB will increase costs for Americans, and it will give the green light to fraudsters
7 minutes.
and predatory actors seeking to cheat hardworking Americans. And so, Chairman Powell, thousands of
So
Georgians of
far,
all, political stripes have written into my office.
this guy has
and
the
they are
best
alarmed,
suit
by an unelected
of this morning.
billionaire
The
and his
best
hacksters'
suit.
dangerous attempts to access Americans' private data and the Treasury Department.
He's the
system
only one
control
that
$6
I'm thinking to
trillion
myself, I
in
want
annual
that suit.
payments to
I would wear
millions
that.
of
This guy's
American
got
citizens,
style.
including
Yeah, he's got
Social
taste.
Security, Medicare,
This guy's
and tax
sharp.
refunds. Quickly, yes or no? Has Elon Musk or members of his team, to your knowledge, attempted to access the Fed's protected data and systems? Yes
No,
or no?
I don't
To your
believe so.
knowledge.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so will you commit to report to this committee, majority and minority, immediately should you become aware of any such attempt by Elon Musk or Doge to pierce the Fed's independence or to access its protected system?
He'll say yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that commitment. The Fed's latest monetary policy report states that the tight labor market has allowed employment and earnings gaps between Black and Hispanic Americans and white Americans to narrow. I was glad to see that
many of the long-standing disparities in employment and wages by sex, race, ethnicity, and education have narrowed. Under the Biden administration, some gaps have reached historic lows. Specifically, the employment gap for Black workers and white workers is near its lowest point in almost 50 years. That is the economy that the Trump administration is inheriting, a historic low in almost 50 years. Chair Powell, as you work to promote maximum employment, what steps will the Fed take to ensure that these equity gains are permanent?
So the best thing we can do is it's both of our mandates really, because as you well know, high inflation hits people at the low end of the income spectrum first and most. And in addition to that, we know that the benefits of a strong labor market over time can be really visible and important in those communities as well. So we pursue.
He's
our
confident
mandate.
with this answer.
We keep our heads down, and it works out that is the single best thing we can do to foster,
entry missed by
closing
two.
those gaps.
You pursue your
By
mandate.
2
You
pips.
want to make sure that it's working. Would you agree that we still need good equity
40
data to continue to narrow and close those
5
gaps by race and gender?
pip loss.
I do think, we're always going to be in favor of good data.
50
at the Fed,
pips.
And we
missed
do
50
have quite a bit
pips.
of that data on our website.
But if we don't
Because
have
of
equity data,
2
it'd be
pips.
difficult to know, right?
Yes.
I'm glad to hear you still believe in the value of good equity data for economic
4 minutes.
policy making.
4 minutes and we
It's
finish
better
live.
to fly with the data
There's
than to fly blind.
there's no
I'm not
entry.
sure what's so controversial?
We missed it
about
by
the
2
data.
pips.
And while I was disappointed to
If
hear
you were
that Federal
wild and you
Reserve,
took
which is independent
the
from White
aggressive,
House, had
nothing to do
scrubbed
now.
the diversity and inclusion section from its
At this
website
point,
after
I'll
President
just-
Trump's executive order.
It's better if I
while also
don't take a
scrubbing
trade
data on the racial,
at
ethnic,
all
and
for the rest
gender
of the day
makeup
at
of
this
its
point.
economists and researchers. I hope you will continue to ensure that
because the next
public
big
has
news
good
is
data
Trump talking.
on how our economy
We don't know
is
when that
working
is.
or not working for historically marginalized Americans. I also hope you will reconsider your decisions around the whitewashing of the Fed's website. Chair Powell, as we think about the value
Whitewashing
of protecting
of the
data on
website.
the
Okay, hold
black-white
on, hold
wealth
on.
gap or employment gap, I think it's important to understand what policymakers can learn from this data. Historically, from what you've seen in the data, historically, what types of economic events have caused the black-white wealth gap or employment gap to widen?
Well, high inflation, downturns, you see generally just take the black unemployment rate, it generally moves at twice the speed of the white unemployment rate. So when it goes up faster, and when it comes down faster. But there is, at the end of the day, there's always been a gap, and we want to run a strong labor market, and we target overall overall labor market conditions for maximum employment. But one of the benefits of that is that gap comes down.
Thank you so much. We all know that fully deregulating our financial regulators like the CFPB, firing bank examiners at the FDIC, or weakening the Fed's supervisory capacity makes an economic shock or recession more likely. We know that this disproportionately impacts Black and Hispanic workers, and there are real consequences to weakening and eliminating financial regulations that keep us safe. Working people are the ones especially who suffer. So thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to close these gaps.
Senator Banks is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, thank you for presenting your report to the committee today and for coming to meet with me last week in my office as well. The Federal Reserve has enormous power.
All right. Whoa, scary. All right, we'll end it there. So, everything we did live, we missed our entry by 2 pips. If you were aggressive enough to not wait and get in and catch some profits, please let me know. But I'm not going to be re-entering now, because the next news is Trump speaking, and we don't know when that is. So that's still tentative. So it is what it is. Exactly. So see you guys on the next live. See you in the chat. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Of course, show some love. And we have a free Telegram channel, so make sure you check that out. It's in the description, so you don't want to miss out on that. Other than that, just like Fahad said, keep smiling. Don't let anybody piss you off. And see you guys on the next session. Fahad, thanks for hanging out. Clara as well. Jordan, and whoever else is here.